tweets by Eric Reid on Roc Nation's partnership with the NFL. You and some others seem to misunderstand that we had no beef with the NFL until they started perpetuating the systemic oppression that we are fighting by blackballing Colin and then me. Now, I won't quit playing but I will be a royal pain in the NFL's you-know-what for acting like they care about people of color by forming numerous disingenuous partnerships to address social injustice while collectively blackballing Colin, the person who brought oppression and social injustice to the forefront of the NFL platform. Earlier, I asked, does Reid have a point? Max said yes. Stephen A. said no. Max, you're up in terms of responding.
First, let me just comment on that comment again one more time. Then I want to respond to Stephen A. I don't know, I'm not agreeing, Stephen A., with the idea that changing behavior isn't the most important thing. Eric Reid is a little hung up, in my view, in changing hearts and minds. I don't really care what the motivation for the NFL changing behavior, or even if that includes just funneling resources towards this issue. As long as they're doing it, that's great. So I don't agree with every sentiment he expresses, but he does have several points to make. I want to get first to your, and because a lot of times when social issues come up, you and I discuss them because we see them similarly, and where we have disagreements, we don't exactly debate them. I think this is a debate right now. As it relates to what you said about our, what we can and can't say on ESPN, using that as an analogy, because it's not our airwaves, it's ESPN's airwaves. I actually think that's a bad analogy unless you mean to prove my point. Because Colin Kaepernick and Eric Reid, let's start with Eric Reid. He was unemployed for a while, not on the merits. He's a good player. He didn't have a deal because he didn't participate in a voluntary ceremony. And the NFL said, because you didn't parrot our political speech, because after all, if kneeling for the flag is political speech, then certainly standing for it is too. Since you didn't parrot our political speech, we are not going to hire you. I'm not sure, as I bring this point up all the time when this issue comes up, I know constitutional guarantees of speech don't extend to the workplace in all ways, but I am not sure that they don't extend there. In other words, can an employer insist that their employees parrot their political speech or else they won't be employed? So that's number one. He didn't have a job. He didn't break any rules. If we broke a rule, that would be different. But that's not the case here. It's very different. Secondly, I agree with the gist of Eric Reid's point in this sense, Stephen A. While you and I see eye to eye about, look, the most important thing is changing behavior and actually getting results, that's really the most important thing. But I do think symbols are important. And I think Colin Kaepernick wins no matter what happens. Let's say he never gets another job. His martyrdom simply grows, and his legend and will increase over time. And he will be remembered as a significant figure of this era in the kind of American popular culture landscape. Out of proportion to his accomplishments on the football field, certainly. That will grow if he never gets a job. On the other hand, the fact that he doesn't have a job, he also wins if he gets the job. If he's unemployed, let's not forget what you said in the beginning of all this with Kaepernick. Careful, Colin, because, all these people who are supporting you, are they going to pay your bills? That is often the refrain of people at a given time when someone risks something protesting, speaking truth to power, or protesting the powers that be. And Stephen A., in a way, that point that you made will be reinforced for future generations. Be careful before you martyr yourself, because who's going to pay your bills kind of thing. You are dealing with powers that can do things that you can do nothing about. And so that symbol is important. Whether or not the NFL is successful in unfairly denying Colin Kaepernick the chance to work, because he was certainly, when last seen, one of the 64 best quarterbacks in the world. And I agree with you about the Castro shirt, by the way. I've always been against him doing that. Castro is terrible. People should not support him, etc. I don't think that's up for debate or should be seriously entertained even. It's obvious on its face. And especially if you're in Miami and you do that, I can understand your reasoning there. And I agree with that in the case of the Miami Dolphins. But that's the only one to me that really has an excuse. Otherwise, he's been unfairly denied, drummed out of the league for not parroting his employer's political speech. It's BS, and Reid is right.
Well, first of all, you and I disagree when you bring up parroting the NFL's speech. I don't view it that way. I don't view the NFL as asking you to parrot their speech at all because I don't view them as speaking. I view them as business people who happen to be white, obviously separated and disassociated from the plight that exists with minority communities, particularly blacks. And as a result, in most instances, is absolutely clueless. And more importantly, do not care about anything but their bottom line. It's not like they asked Colin Kaepernick to say something specifically. What they did was say, excuse me, this political position that you're taking, could you do it off the football field on Sundays? Could you go and do it somewhere else as opposed to bringing it to our NFL field of play? Because we believe that's going to compromise our bottom line. That is not asking somebody to parrot political speech. That is asking somebody to take your speech and take it somewhere else since you don't have a problem with us. Now, if Colin Kaepernick and Eric Reid said, we have a problem with the NFL, and that was the reason they used the NFL field as a platform, that would be entirely different. That's not what they did. They used the NFL field to disseminate a message with aiming for mass appeal and mass attention, and they got it. But the problem is what came along with it is the NFL saying, yo, we don't really have anything to do with this, and we're not going to let you potentially compromise our bottom line because of it. Because remember, where it really, really heated up was when the president of the United States called them a bunch of SOBs and that he fired all of them. That's when everybody really raised up. Prior to that, there was just a few people kneeling. That's it. They were pretty much standing alone. Now let me get to your point. When we talk about the National Football League, we talk about Eric Reid having a point. We're understanding where you're coming from. Your level of sensitivity, Max, is greatly appreciated. As a black man and some of the things that you've expressed, I appreciate it and I thank you for it. But what I would also like to ask you to do in return is to understand that as a black man, I'm going to have a different point of view because I'm going to think about the collateral damage that ultimately it could potentially have upon us that might never affect people that look like you. The reality of the situation is, Eric Reid, in that quote, how many people are getting away with that? Colin Kaepernick and his defiant position, although completely justified towards society, maybe not necessarily the NFL. How many people are going to get away with that? You got people on social media sitting up there, sticking out their chest. Go ahead, Colin Kaepernick, go ahead. And I'm saying when you encourage people to act in such a way, think about Eric Reid here. He went up against Malcolm Jenkins. We going to call Malcolm Jenkins a sellout? Is that what we going to do? We going to act like he wasn't thinking about the minority communities throughout this nation when he was able to generate about $89 million from owners, which, by the way, should have been more. Please don't get me wrong. But he was working with the Players of Coalition. We're going to try to call him a sellout. What are we going to do now? We're going to sit up there, and because Jay-Z is a capitalist and he made a business deal, we're going to suddenly forget that Jay-Z has been speaking out and speaking up on a plethora of issues that affect the minority communities throughout this nation and throughout this world for years and years and years. Anywhere you go, all over the world, you've got people of minority descent, African American and beyond, that rave about Jay-Z, and not just his abilities as a rap artist, but his conscience. And because he's smart enough and adroit enough to know how to go about the business of making business deals that will in turn enable him to use the strong arm of the NFL to affect communities throughout this world, we're going to sit up there and just dismiss him as some sellout dude that's just thinking about business, and suddenly we're going to question whether or not the black card should be stripped from him. I think that's criminal. I think that's egregious. The fact of the matter is, Colin Kaepernick did not protest for Colin Kaepernick. Eric Reid did not protest just for Colin Kaepernick. They protested for blackness. They protested because of racial oppression. They protested because black folks have been dealing with stuff that is just, it's ridiculous and it's criminal for decades, if not centuries. That's what they've been speaking up about. And now this is an effort to address it. And because Colin Kaepernick wasn't called or he wasn't consulted, we gonna sit up here and denigrate Jay-Z? Come on now. Come on now.
Stephen A.
I don't agree with that.
First, let me say I appreciate.
And I'm not saying you. By the way, I'm not saying you would denigrate Jay-Z.
No, I understand. I got it.
I want to talk about you.
Make it clear to the people. Sure. I appreciate your point about saying you're a black man in America who cares about the fortunes of, let's say, young black people in America or African Americans, period.
Yes, I do.
And so it's easy for me to stand up or sit up here and say on TV that you should be principled and take risks and chances when those don't affect, those kind of positions don't affect someone who looks like me the same way that they affect others, right? I appreciate that point of view. That's why it's incumbent upon me now to say, and people like me to say, wait a minute, Kaepernick still doesn't have a job. It should not go down like that. It should not be the case that here's yet another example when standing up for what you believe in costs a young black man his job, right? Like, or has that kind of an impact on a person of color, unfairly denied his right to work. Now, the reason I say it's political speech, and I think it clearly is that you're starting from the premise that, no, it's not. This is just a popular thing for them to do. Yes, it's a popular political position for the NFL to take an anthem ceremony. But in fact, standing up for the flag is a form of speech, in fact, if you're going to argue that kneeling is also a form of speech. It can't be one but not the other.
Max, here's how I can prove what I'm saying about the NFL. Marshawn Lynch, beast mode, acknowledged that on many occasions he didn't stand for the national anthem. Right. On one video, we saw him during the national anthem sitting on a bench eating a banana while the national anthem was being played. No one said anything, including the NFL. Why did they say something when it came to Colin Kaepernick? Initially, they didn't say anything to him. And then all of a sudden, the reporters started reporting it. It started gaining momentum, and as a result, there was a constituency out there that was speaking so vehemently against it that it scared the owners in terms of them believing it would affect their bottom line. So it's not about political speech. It's about their money. Well, and they were saying, we don't want it to affect our money. That's what happened.
I'm not saying the NFL isn't worried about the bottom line, and that's not what motivated their actual behavior. About that, we can agree for the most part. I do think there's an impulse with the owners, who are billionaires who are used to getting their way, to want people to stay in their place. Especially some kinds of people, it seems to me.
Sure, but that's everywhere. Absolutely right. I'm not disputing that. That's obvious.
Sure. But what you just said proves my point. Marshawn Lynch sat down, but because it wasn't viewed as a statement, there was no backlash. But Kaepernick was asked about it. It started becoming, it was clear that he was making a statement. And the NFL said, no, you cannot make the statement on our time. But we're still going to have this ceremony and make our statement.
No, Max. He made the statement he was making was when he took a knee, correct?
Right.
What I'm saying is he took a knee for weeks. They never said anything until it was publicized. And after it was publicized and people reacted to it and their bottom line was being threatened, that's when they spoke up.
Right. That's what's motivating. I'm not denying that's not what's motivating their behavior.
So if Go ahead.
But the point of speech is it's not up, like the right to do certain things is not up for referendum. And if it is, then the NFL has to change their rules and see if they can get away with it. But it was not the equivalent of him talking about something like you and I talking about something that's verboten on ESPN airwaves, because it wasn't against the rules. He did not have to stand, and yet he lost his job.
Max, and I am saying to you, I have no problem. I've stood up and said the man was right. He did not violate any laws. He didn't even violate any bylaws of the National Football League.
Right.
Y'all, in their collective bargaining agreement, they strongly encouraged the NBA. The NBA mandated standing for the national anthem. Major League Baseball mandated standing for the national anthem. The National Football League strongly encouraged. They didn't mandate. They were the ones that dropped the ball by not making sure it was a part of the collective bargaining agreement. So to me, right there, Colin Kaepernick is in the right. The NFL is wrong. We understand that. What I'm saying is the impetus for this conversation, the motivation behind this discussion is Eric Reid's reaction. His belief seems to be everything should be about Colin Kaepernick getting back in the NFL, when in fact That wasn't why Colin Kaepernick
I don't
kneeled,
think he's saying
and that
everything.
wasn't why Eric Reid kneeled either.
Look, as I said, I don't agree with the entire sentiment of Reid's comments because Jay-Z sacrificed nothing. He turned down the Super Bowl halftime show. He had no knowledge he was going to be given this at the time, to our knowledge, right? So it's not like he didn't say, and he said, you need me more than I need you. And he was right because this is benefiting the NFL, I think, more than it's going to benefit Jay-Z, but that's partly because they can co-opt some of the counterculture or protest movement against the league based on the Kaepernick situation.
But that's how you look at it.
No, what
that's
I'm
how
saying
you look
is
at it. I don't look at them as co-opting it. You know why? Because now if you're Jay-Z, you're in a position where you can dictate whether you choose to have it co-opted or not.
Right, but my point is both things can be true, that Jay-Z can do very good work in his position and the NFL. Like the NFL, why do they do it? Because they have something to gain too. So it's not that I agree with all of Reid's sentiment, but I strongly agree with the idea of Kaepernick as a symbol. And I don't see why you see these two issues as mutually exclusive. While you can do good work, if Jay-Z is in a position to do it, and the NFL can too, it is also important, I think, and Reid thinks and others think, that Kaepernick be given the opportunity to win a job that he was unfairly drummed out of. That is still a big point.
But Max, you have a point if we get to ignore the 3-16 record in his last 19 starts, the 1-10 record in his last season. Also, if we ignore Baltimore as an option, Miami as an option, and how those things did not pan out. The fact of the matter is those things happened. So you have people that have been saying he's blackball, even before those things transpired. Then he had an opportunity to be on those teams, but those things didn't pan out for the reasons that I articulated. Eric Reid is saying this while he's on the Carolina Panthers. Let me ask you a question. Max Kellerman, if you sat up there, let me ask you a question, and please take that video off the screen. Put me on camera. Let me ask this question, and let's put this out there. White kids, black kids, Hispanic kids, beyond. Eric Reid just said, I'm going to stay in the NFL's you-know-what. Blah, blah, blah. How many people get to say that about their employer and keep their job?
And what's the point?
My point to you is, why are you taking this position? You're taking this position because of, I'm talking about Eric Reid. Right. You seem to be taking this position strictly because of Colin Kaepernick. You're looking at the Players Coalition, you're looking at Jay-Z, you're looking at individuals being co-opted when their stance was, we want issues of racial prejudice, racial oppression addressed in our society. If the NFL is doing that, if Jay-Z is doing that, if others are joining with them to do it, what's the problem?
Because we, and by that I mean people with social conscience, also don't want there to be yet another example of the powers that be furnishing people who may, as you said originally about Kaepernick, in the future want to take a stand, others admonishing them and warning them, careful, this will come at great sacrifice to you. So just as you said, it's easy for me to sit up here and say people should do X, Y, and Z, therefore it is incumbent upon me and others now to say, hey, let's not forget, Kaepernick deserves the chance to win a job. That's precisely why it's important.
We have been saying, you're missing my point. We have been saying it. There's a nation of people that have been saying it. You are Eric. Hold on. You are Eric Reid. You literally are taking a check from the NFL while saying this stuff. And I'm saying to you, but the point is, his very presence in the National Football League, an owner can sit up there. Do you realize an owner can sit up there and say right now, Max Kellerman, Eric Reid is in the NFL, he can ball. We don't think Colin Kaepernick can.
Because,
no. Hold on. I'm saying they could say it, Max.
Okay, I don't
agree with them.
Let's cut to the heart of it.
Max.
It's unfortunate Kaepernick, because this would be much clearer, wasn't like a Pro Bowl caliber player when this happened, because once upon a time he was. But he was certainly one of the best 64.
Yes.
And is it about?
I still believe he is.
Right, I agree, probably. But do you think that's what it's really about, or is it Kaepernick, no one else, who is the symbol of this, and therefore it's important that the powers that be crush that symbol? That's what Reid is, and also
I believe it's the latter. I believe you're right.
Me too.
I believe it's the latter.
I want clarification on something you said earlier. Are you suggesting that the fact that Reid is able to say what he says suggests that the NFL is healthier, is more robust in terms of allowing, that the health is more robust in terms of allowing their players to speak their mind in a way that maybe other jobs you can't? Are you suggesting that, or are you saying that Eric Reid is a bad example to others who are not in the position to speak out, and we shouldn't look at Eric Reid as kind of as a role model, because after all, if you do that in your job, whoever's watching us, you could be in big trouble. What is your point with bringing up the Reid
It would
stuff?
be more the former or the latter, because I would certainly not disrespect Eric Reid like that. I have tremendous respect for him because I think he's a damn good player, but more importantly, I respect his courage. But I do believe for him to be as abrasive as he has been towards the Malcolm Jenkins of the world, the Players Coalition, now what he's saying about Jay-Z and what have you, I have a problem with that because I don't think he's looking at the big picture. I think he's a bit narrow-minded in his focus. His vitriol is something he wears on his sleeve because it's not enough for him. It appears to me, hold on, it appears to me it's not enough for him for the result that they supposedly said this was about to reach fruition. It seems to me like if you don't do things exactly the way Eric Reid believes you should do it, he's got a problem with you, and he's very abrasive with it, and I don't think that's fair to those other guys.
That could be. I don't think that's an unfair reading of Reid. I don't read it exactly that way, so to speak, but I don't think that's a bad reading of the situation. I would suggest the following. That if the point is, because you brought up the example, that, hey, the NFL is not so draconian in its kind of measures toward its players, and they don't really put their foot on everyone's neck.
Look what Reid's,
but if you want to say that, look what Reid's able to do. How many professions can you criticize your employer the way Reid does? I would suggest that's more evidence about the importance of NFL owners to not give Kaepernick a job. A lot of things are permissible so long as they win on Kaepernick not playing in the league, which is why it's important Reid brings it up.
And I would say to you that the Eric Reids of the world need to understand that he's a special individual. He's got a special talent, and people like him in his position are special. The vast majority, 99% of folks in this world are not in their position. And to encourage stuff like that is to send people in an abyss they will not be able to lift themselves out of. He needs to be more careful in what he encourages people to do and how they should do it, because it can end up affecting them far more detrimentally than he wishes for. That is my position.
Fight the power is what I say. I mean, I hear you, but
I'm sure you do.
Riveting
I'm
debate,
fighting the
guys.
power every day, but there's a way to do things.
I'll leave it by saying this. The game is forever grateful and better off because of Colin's sacrifices. Unfortunately, Cap is blackballed, but the change movement needs people like Jay-Z to carry the torch and help force change, and I think he's the perfect guy to be leading that. We'll leave it there. LeBron had plenty to be upset about last season, so after a great offseason, what could possibly